and you'll see it. Brothers, let's move straight on to the main speaker now. They're dumbing us down to protect their own interests, it says here. But don't tell anybody. Why? Because they won't believe you. You're trying to tell the world that they're dumbing us down, but guess what? They won't believe you. But maybe they will believe this sister, this queen, this lady. We call her Lady Ma'at, and she's back with us for part 2 of dumbing us down. Lady Ma'at, are you with us, queen? Come on, sister, man. We've been waiting for you, man. Jeez. How's it going, my queen?
Evening, family.
Jeez, how you feeling?
I'm feeling very good, feeling very hot, but I'm loving that because we don't know how long that will last. But I'm feeling very good and very fired up, Brother Andrew, very fired up as I've been still doing work this week in the field of education and school and getting prepared. And then Sister Jarita's on with us this week. She was talking about it herself last week. And I'm fired up because it was beautiful to see Sister Yolanda at the start, the March of the Young.
Yes.
Leading the way in the work that she's doing. I think that's beautiful to see our young people taking up the march, taking up the struggle. And it was even more wonderful to see Mr. Gregory Logan, not just a black head teacher, not just a Rastafarian head teacher, but a spiritual, unconscious black teacher. And I'll be making reference to that as well. The importance, not just having black teachers.
Thank you, sister.
Schoolroom it's about having black conscious teachers, even if they're not.
Come on.
Once they're conscious, they can have a life-changing effect on our young people. So we need to be mindful of that. So, Brother Andrew, I've got to say, again, I won't finish. There is a part 3 I can see, basing it off of the timing next week. So yet again, can you stop me where you need? And from there, we can carry on if your program allows next week. Because today, I want to be focusing on not intelligence testing as such, but the different methods that are used to assess our young people and the development of their mind. And it started with us and when our families came over here. So that's my kind of focus from today.
So can you share your screen, sister?
I am going to do that.
Oh, as you're doing that, Lady Adele, I want to give a shout out to Sister Charmaine Simpson of Black History Studies. I believe she's just logged in, and I know that she loved your breakdown last week, sister. But I must give a shout out, Sister Charmaine. I've got nothing but admiration for Sister Charmaine, Brother Mark, and all of her children, because that is what you call that's what you call a family that's on the mission of liberation. So, Sister Charmaine, even though I can't see you, Brother Mark, even though I can't see you right now, I salute you and I thank you for every single time you get time to come onto the Hidden Truth platform. Are you ready, my queen?
Well, Brother Andrew, you won't let me tick the 2 boxes at the bottom, so I'm going to share anyway, and hopefully it will work.
These people, no, can I just say, sister, no, we've got to deal with Zoom, beloved. They are really messing up with our platform. You should be able to, okay.
The boxes are there, but they're
okay, come out,
and you can't.
Come out the share. Come out the share, sister. Come out.
I'm out.
Now going. Try now.
Yeah, they come alive. Don't know what you did there.
See what I'm saying? No, what they don't understand. They don't understand, Lady Adele, why they call me the investigator. No, I'm not joking, sister. I got to learn all of the tricks of the trade. I'm not boasting. But I've got to learn so many little tricks because I see what they're doing with our platform, sister. And so I try to think, what can I do to get around it to make sure that we can keep this show going? All right, Lady Adele, I'm going to keep my mouth quiet. It's all yours, sister.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Brother Andrew. And evening again, once again, family. So this is part 2 of Dumbing Us Down. And those of you with me last week will recognize the image of this Paulo Freire here and the quotes that he made. It would be extremely naive to expect the dominant classes to develop a type of education that would enable subordinate classes to perceive social injustices critically. And he was born around, he was a child in the 1930s. And I'm sure we can all agree that this statement is still relevant today. So just to do a little bit of a recap, particularly for those of you who weren't here last week, we were looking at the fact that schooling is about dumbing down our children, not education. And that we came to understand that schooling is a process. It's the process of how we are formally educated. We started by looking at some statistics that showed how we are still underachieving as a group of people, how we're still not making that significant contributions to the betterance of ourselves or significant contributions globally within the community, and how we continue to be underrepresented. And that is just a reminder that that is not of our doing. It's not because of our own laziness, but it's about the systems that are in place. We also then went to look at, oops, get it going again. We looked at the hidden curriculum. We were looking at the work of some great educationalists, one of them being John Taylor Gatto, and he talked about this hidden curriculum, which is a set of life lessons which are learnt but not intended to be openly taught. And they become assimilated into our young people because they're there from day one. And the 7 key ones he talks about is confusion. That's about teaching lessons all in isolation, so there's no link from subject to subject. He talks about ranking, how we rank children by age or by ability or by ethnicity or by cognitive ability, or about different kind of labelings, and how we put such groups of children together. So we're not drawing the best out of children. It goes on to speak about indifference, how when children are really engaged in something, the bell may come and we have to move on to the next thing. So we're not encouraged to see something through to its end, to continue with that train of passion and to keep going. It stopped and then we have to come back to it later. So it teaches a kind of indifference. Speaks about the emotional dependency, that the right and wrong is determined by so-called experts within the field of education. And intellectual dependency, what is the children take on as being important knowledge from what's not important knowledge, is determined by another set of people. It's not by their own decisions or their own kind of studies and independence. And how self-worth is determined by the school and by society. How do you value yourself? And exam seems to be the way to measure self-worth today. And that whole big brother effect, how even things like homework or things like talking about what's happening in your family home means that there's an eye being kept on us and our young people all the time. So we looked at that hidden curriculum, and I made reference to Ken Robinson, who's one of the great educationists, who talks about the importance of creativity, of initiative and passion to really drive our young people to find out what it is they really want to do, so they have something that they can run with and stick with, and how he was not accepted by the Conservative Labour government because this caused a problem. If you have our young people being creative and imaginative, the impact that this could have on keeping society at a status quo. Today, I want to, oh yes, this quote here, when we talk about, well, we've got to change the system and, you know, we stand there with our placards. No, we don't need school reform because schools are working exactly as they're designed to be or intended to be. And so we may argue and be resistant to that, but that fact is not going to change. So we have to look at what it is we're going to do for our young people to mitigate something that is unlikely to be changing. So today, I want us to be looking at colonialism and the migration. We're going to pass through and touch on Bernard Coward's piece of work. Then we're going to look at the different forms of intelligence testing right through to IQ. And then if time allows, we're going to look at networking. And networking is something that really, Gregory Logan, when he spoke, makes that mention. Networking does not have a spiritual base to it, whereas community does. And we're going to look at the difference between community and networking, and how networking is not just destroying our communities, but destroying our young people. So can I start by asking Brother Andrew, can you tell me who this is? I'm only asking you, Brother Andrew, because I can't read the chat at the same time. I'm not that clever, and I can only see my presentation.
We spoke about this man a few weeks ago. Let's have a look. Some people are saying, Chakanumi says Leopold, Victoria says Leopold, Simon Mohammed says Leopold. Everyone's coming in as Leopold.
Leopold. So this, we know this image. So this is one of the images that sticks in our mind. Yes, this is King Leopold of Belgium. And I just want to share with you a quote that of what he directed his missionaries in the Congo to do. This is his quote: "Never to teach the niggers to know God. You will go to interpret the gospel in a way it will be best to protect your interest. You have to keep watch on disinteresting our savages from the riches that is plenty. And that is quite critical because this is the foundation of colonialism and imperialism, and that would have fed through the families of these people of that age and would still leak down into people in positions of power today. This was his words. He also, we need to know that our great-grandparents, they were considered, they were encouraged to love poverty, because like happy are the poor because they inherit heaven. And we know this from the Beatitudes. And the Beatitudes is one of those chapters that are in the Negro Bible, because it supports us being happy in our condition of slavery or in servitude. This is a quote here again from King Leopold. And in the past, we would say if we wanted something hidden from us as a people, it was said to put it into a book. But today, because many of us now as a Black community can read, the phraseology has now changed. It says, teach students to read and not to reason. So it's no good that we can just read now. So hiding things in a book can still be hidden in a book as long as we make sure our children don't understand how to reason or do what we call inference around on what they read. So that is quite critical, that reading comes with that sense of reasoning and rationalizing and discussing what is being read. Now, I just want to talk a bit about reading. But even how we as a community were taught to read came with an obstacle within it, just in the style. So during the time of slavery, our colonial masters taught their children how to read using phonics. For those of you who don't know what phonics is, it's about saying like a and b, recognizing ing and ed and t is how the phonetic sounding of the letters are. And so it was about matching sounds to letters. But by the 1930s, when here in England, we're becoming a little bit more liberal, even in our education, there was a move away from teaching reading phonetically to learning the whole word as a picture. But as time went on, within the 50s, 60s, and 70s, it was found that it was not the effective way to teach reading. And as a result, literacy levels began to fall once again. And so it was decided that a reading would return back to this phonetic way of teaching it because the outcomes were better. But what we need to remember, that as a Black community, we couldn't fall back on this phonetic way of learning because we were never taught in that phonetic way of learning originally, because we were taught to use words and pictures. So this phonetic reading tool was a bit of an obstacle because we weren't used to it in that way. And so reading became an issue for us. While those more elite students in the more prestigious schools went back to phonetics, and their reading and their reasoning was going way beyond the rest of us. And Frederick Douglass, one of our great educators, said, I set out with high hope and a fixed purpose that at whatever cost of trouble, we need to learn how to read. Because once you learn to read, you will be forever free. And that's whether you read yourself or you have safe people who could read around you, because everything is hidden in the written word. And later on, and maybe next week when we meet again, I'll be talking about that accept button that we press whenever we upgrade our systems without ever reading it. And once we look at that, we will see how we can trap ourselves rather than freeing ourselves because we are too lazy in reading. So we all know this big famous image. It represents all of our families' migration over from the Caribbean. My grandparent came by boat, not by the Windrush. My grandmother came by plane. But this is the symbol for our movement over here into Britain. So our grandparents came to this country expecting a better life for themselves and for their children. But unbeknown to them, they weren't just coming to perform jobs as the message went out, as the flyer went out. They came here for three main purposes that the government had in hand. And one of them was to increase the size of the labor force following the war, and that was particularly about unskilled jobs. And the reason for that was not because they necessarily just wanted to fill that job market, but it would allow them to keep wages down and profits high. So that's important to remember. The second main purpose for our family coming over here was to take up the jobs that the English people refused to do. And that was to overcome the labour shortage in those areas, which meant the English people now would be put in their place. If you're not going to work, we're going to find somebody else to do it. But I think the third most important reason the government wanted our families to come over here was to divide the working class and dampen their militancies. Because what happened, it gave a focus for the English people at that time, the militant English in particular. It allowed them to develop this, to develop racism, because when they are focusing on racism, they were not focusing on what the government was doing and what the government was taking away from them and not putting in place. So with all that going on, for all the contributions we did to help the government put these things to underpin the English society at that time, it meant that our serving that purpose meant that we ourselves were not building our own infrastructure, and it was limiting the impact that we could have on our own collective life, and we were being limited in our ability to grow outside of the church. So it's very important when we talk about our families coming over. Yes, they came over to take up jobs for greater opportunities, but the government at that time also had another motive. So we know our grandparents wanted and expected their children to have equal access to what we call quality first education and higher education opportunities. But they only came to find themselves and their children placed in what was then called ESN schools, or educationally subnormal schools, or put in the lower set, or not being able to have access to grammar schools. And what was happening, they were being, once you're in an educationally subnormal school, you're labelled as an imbecile. And that meant there was no hope of returning to the kind of mainstream way of education, or rising up into the higher sets, unless you really could prove beyond any reasonable doubt that you had the ability to do that, and you could be understood. Your accent could be understood. Even when I was at school, as a person born into this country of a Jamaican and a British parent, I was labelled stage 5 on what was then called English as a second language register, purely on the grounds that I had one parent that was born in the Caribbean. So we were labelled even to that degree. And so these children, which is now my generation, our life work and our successes and our failures have been determined by our placement in either lower sets or these educationally subnormal schools, or not having access into grammar school. And this has had an impact on us, whether we recognize it at all, our self-identity, our peer relations, our social relations, and our place within the world. And if we ever were to sit back and talk generationally amongst ourselves, we would probably see that much more clearly. And it led to Bernard Coed writing his most famous work, which is called How the West Indian Child is Made Educationally Subnormal in the British School System, the Scandal of the Black Child in Schools in Britain. And I reread this as a part of my research and preparation for this presentation, because I wanted to know, have things changed for our young people today, or does anything else still remain the same? And what does still stands out is that at every level of education, we remain behind, whether or not we've been to private schools, whether or not we've been into state schools, but we still continue to remain behind at every level in education. And so that means we are still kind of considered as educationally subnormal. But what has happened, those terminology has now been replaced with the rise in our young people with ASD, the rise in our young people with autism, the rise in our young people with mental health conditions, the rise in our young children's sexualized behavior, allegedly, a rise in our young children's violent behavior, allegedly. But we need that, society needs that there, because because as long as those things are in place and those labelings are there and we can consider to be subnormal in some way or other, we do not pose a threat. So it's not about whether our children suffer or don't suffer from these issues here, but as long as the labels are in place, it's easy to identify that our young people are not a threat. So the work that Bernard Cowan wrote at that time is still very relevant today. It's just that the terminology has changed. So that meant that we, as children of that era, attending those kind of schools or being in those sets and being steered away from grammar schools, we couldn't pass on anything more than what we knew. And it said that the authorities, a quote was said in Coward's book, it says that authorities should realize that by placing these children in educationally subnormal schools, they are not solving a problem, but creating one. So this whole purpose of keeping our young people down was creating a problem, not solving a problem for society. Because for these same children, which is our generation, will grow up to react with hatred and violence against ourselves and the system that has crippled them. And we can see the words of Coward in society today. So we may not even recognize, some of us, the impact of this and what we have carried or projected onto our children, because we do know that our children are not born challenging, they're not born argumentative, they're not born defiant, and they're not born depressed. But it is a combination of this childhood experience mixed with our childhood experience, mixed with social engineering, particularly through the media and through schooling, that make our children what they are. And I just want to share with you a task that I do with teachers whenever I'm doing some area of teacher training. So you can see here's a table here, and it's got 4 columns: sport, music, politics, and science. And without any preparation, without any forewarning, I just say, can you please write down 10 key people you know in each of those particular areas. And when I do it with subject teachers, I would say, if you're a maths teacher, replace science with maths. If you're a history teacher, replace the science with history, your subject area of specialism. And then as the session goes on, I ask them, please cross out anybody who's non-African in that list and count up how many people of African heritage are in those columns. I'm sure that you can see straight away that we would have a lot of African, Black and Caribbean in the areas of sport and music, but very few in politics, very few in science, very few in history, very few in geography, very few in music, very few in art. And that just goes to show that the education system and what we learned and what is given to us and who we see that we recognize as champions in subject areas are still defined by our colonial and an imperialistic philosophy that lives within the education system today. So this is a really good test even to try out on yourself. I know that when I did it as a maths major and a music major, when I listed all the music people and all the maths people that I could list as significant in those subject areas, I was lucky if I had more than one Black person in each of those columns. So I had to go away as an educator and find out my Black history so that I had something more and richer to give the young people in my classroom. And even to find out something for our Asian children or our Turkish children, whatever community was represented in my class, could I bring to them somebody in the world of education or politics or music or history that they could hold on to as a part of their heritage. So looking at intelligence now, this man here, his name is Pierre Broca. In fact, those of you who are medical students or medical professionals in the room will know that a part of the frontal lobe is named after Pierre Broca. And this man here, Sir Francis Galton, who was a eugenicist, both of them from the 1800s, were amongst the first scientists to think about measuring intelligence. And they thought they could determine intelligence by measuring the size of the human skull. And the larger the skull, they thought the smarter the person. And they were able to prove this to be the case, but their research became challenged. And when it was proven that the skulls that they were filling, Black skulls and Western skulls that they filled with sand or seeds, they were pressing down more sand and seeds in the European skulls than they were into the African skulls, because then they could prove that the European skull was bigger. But this information, if proved, and when it was worked out what they were doing, null and voided all of their research. But at the time itself, it made an impact on other scientists at that time who took it to be true. So he started measuring of intelligence. Then I just want to mention this person here, Wilhelm Wundt. He's among, he was around at the same time, but he used a different way of measuring intelligence. He was using the human's ability to reflect on their own thoughts as a measure of intelligence. I haven't gone into any further into him. It's something that I will certainly want to do, but he was the first person to identify himself as a psychologist. So it was through his research on intelligence and the human mind that psychology really started to come into the forefront. But this is the intelligence that we know so much about, and this is IQ, the intelligent quotient. And it was invented in 1904 by these two Frenchmen, Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon. And what had happened, the French Ministry of Education asked these two men to develop a test that could distinguish between mentally retarded children from normally intelligent children who were being lazy. And it included logical reasoning, rhyming words, and problem solving. That was the original IQ testing. And what it was calculated, it had a score calculation which took mental age divided by chronological age times 100, and that would give you your IQ scoring. Now, it begs the question, who determines what mental age is? With further research, I could, with Binet and Simon, I will certainly be able to find that. Some of you may wish to go away and do that, or may even already know that. That is how IQ was tested for the purposes of differing between mentally retarded children and lazy children. But if we go now to this gentleman here, Henry H. Goddard. You see, Binet and Simon said that IQ testing that they had developed could not be and should not be used for measuring intelligence beyond the purpose that they were using it. But Henry Goddard, who is known as the father of intelligence testing, he refused to take this advice and started running IQ tests for himself. And he started to come up with his own definitions. And so he said that anybody who got a low score, who were what they would call pre-verbal, they were doing poorly on the verbal testing, he called those people idiots. And anybody whose scoring showed them to be illiterate, he defined those people as imbeciles. He actually coined the term moron, and a moron is defined as somebody who's highly functioning with a mental age of 8 to 12 years old that has defiant behavior. And he saw morons as a eugenic threat because they could pass as normal and could then go on and reproduce, have children that would produce more morons. And through this label, it was enough to start institutionalizing people with low IT scores. It was enough to start sterilizing people. It was enough to deport people. It was enough to be sterilizing South American women during the early 1900s. It was enough to offer shorter prison sentences for those men who were happy to undergo vasectomies, is enough to let people out from prison earlier if they would take birth control strategies at that time. He then argued, however, that you could reverse these treatments, but then you have to ask yourself, who could afford to reverse a vasectomy treatment? So he had a whole raft of medical ways of getting rid of the people he considered as morons, so they couldn't reproduce, all based on his IQ testing. So he devised it, and that was enough for him. And governments and medical professions went along and allowed some of these atrocities to take place. IQ testing then and IQ testing now still continues to condone racial bias. And we have to look at some of the reasons why Black children, even those in the best societies, get some of the lower scores. So some of the reasons for this is that what's considered to be intelligent in one society may not be considered to be intelligence in another. Some of the reasons children get lower scores is about how much and how parents talk with their children, how parents deal with their children's questions. I don't know if you've been in the situation, I've often done it myself in schools where I ask the children a question and then answer it myself because I don't have the patience to give them thinking time. And they say that children need at least 6 seconds of thinking time to process what you've said, but we're reluctant to give our children that. One of the reasons our children get lower scores is about not having a Black teacher. And it's not about whether the teacher is good or bad, but it's about whether that teacher is conscious. It's a conscious Black teacher, as I said before, that makes the difference, not whether you're a brilliant teacher or not a brilliant teacher. What gives us low IQ scores is being taught by teachers who don't have high expectations of you. Also, what leads to lower level scores is the ability of our children to access and use the English language. The measure of the English language is not intelligence itself, but your ability to use it. And what is becoming an issue, of course, is that they're starting now to accept what's that? The text abbreviations is now becoming acceptable in exams at this point as part of quotations. But who says that's not going to be extended? And the more our children start writing in this shorthand and not using the full English language appropriately is going to be a setback for them. Another reason our young people suffer lower test scores is because the tests themselves have no real relevance to the world around them. It's often abstract, requiring just isolated thinking with no connection. And that's not how we as a people think and how we process. We look at things holistically and with purpose. And also it's been found that our children score lower on the in the intelligent test because they know that they're in a world where intelligence, they're not expected to be intelligent or encouraged to be intelligent. So they have a poor attitude towards testing in this way. So we've got to be mindful of all these things with our young people. Do we want to do something about it and change that? Then that's something we may choose. But I think the safest place to do that is we do that for ourselves. What we need to make sure that we are doing is that we are talking with our children, not at our children, but with our children. We need to get our children to solve problems and not tell them the solution and lead them to know what to do with it, but can they problem solve from the smallest to the biggest things. Don't answer our children's questions outright to them. We could prompt them and lead them, but get them to have that resilience and that persistence and tenacity to work out their questions. Get them to think their questions through. Get them to have good English, use good English, talk good English, speak good English, read good English. One of the things my grandmother always used to say to me is that she writes in English, but she speaks in Jamaican. And so it's living in those two worlds, and we have to get that balance. We need to, as adults, be asking our children random questions that may not have a purpose so that our children can be hot and be able to respond very quickly to different circumstances. We need to encourage critical thinking, and critical thinking without our young people of just saying, oh, I give up now. Because in schools, we teach you to give up now because the bell is going to go, so let me give you the answer now, or turn to the back of the book. So we've got to be mindful of this. You see, IQ testing locates each child's mental susceptibility on an official rating scale of someone else's agenda. It is not a test that is there for our own agenda at all. And for those of you who've been mulling over this slide now, you want to know what the answer is. Let me give you the answer. You might want to screenshot that screen there because you might want to go away and say, well, how does A plus B plus C equal 57? But I'll leave all the problem solvers in the room to work that one out there. But that's a kind of example from an early IQ test right there. So going on still in this area of intelligence is this this theory here, Bloom's taxonomy of learning. And there I've outlined it there. And all educationists in the room, you will be familiar with Bloom's taxonomy of learning. So he was a Jewish man, born in 1930, died in 1999, turn of the century. He was an educational psychologist, and he had this system of classification of educational objectives as a way of mastering learning. It was about these levels of cognitive functioning, and it was a tool he used on children and how he thought they developed into thinking and to be thinking in these kind of these units. He would say that children learn first to remember, and then once they have the art of remembering, into understanding. Then once they had those two skills, they could learn how to apply. And once they had all of that, they could move on to analysis, evaluation, and then creativity. But if you look at young children and watch them from the ages of the baby to 2, you can see that children can be evaluating and analyzing and creating as well as remembering, understanding, and applying. And the dangerous thing within education is that we focus in the early years on the bottom 3, and then we move up into the later years in the top 3, by which time it's too late for our children. They need to be learning and doing all 6 all at the same time. So I would say, parents and carers within the room, get a hold of Bloom's taxonomy of learning and look at that and be working in the conversation and the activities and the games and the fun you have with your children to make sure they're accessing all of these 6 levels, because in schools, we do it in a completely different way. Now, Bloom's has been in and out of fashion. Over the years, it has a big wave and then it disappears, but it's been around and educators have been using it, and we've been talking about it for the last 15 years. And we use this, like I said, on children according to their age and their ability. And in Bloom's own words, he says, this is a tool to classify the ways individuals are to act, think, and feel as a result of some unit of measurement. That's his definition of it. So using this in education, we are determining and putting a ceiling on the developmental, mental development of our children according to this social scale, which then you can see imprisons the mind. And if you go back to Ken Robinson, he's not about imprisoning the mind. He's about the creativity. He's going straight to the top of the Bloom's taxonomy of learning, about that creativity and that evaluation and that initiative, where education wants us to start at the bottom. And we need to be mindful of this, because this piece of work we're taught in our educational training institutions. But just talking about IQ, I couldn't move on without talking about these 3 great young people from our community. Romani Wilfred, who's got an IQ of 162, he's from Britain. Anala Beavers from the United States, 145, and Alana George, hers is 140. She's from the UK. And you can see how young these children are. And Romani Wilfred, his score is higher than Einstein and higher than Bill Gates. So can you imagine, with the right guidance, what that young man can do? So the IQ measures the top 2% on an improved intelligent test scale, the IQ scale, the top 2%, and you have to be scoring 120 and above. And achieving these top scores does lead to exciting opportunities for social, cultural, and intellectual interaction. So I'm just hoping that these 3 young people will be well guided, so that they're not lost in that system, that can go on to develop and use their level of IQ to make a change for our community in the future. So just so far today and from last week, we can see that our education system is still rooted in colonial ideology and Eurocentric ideology, which then perpetuates the notion of the superiority of the Western race within education. And this perpetuates the unchallenged assumption that Western and European views are not only fact, but they are transferable into all contexts. So what we have done over the years, we have pushed for our African and Caribbean history and culture to be on the school and the university curriculum, and we want to celebrate our successes. And now we can see and hear that the education community have begun to listen to us, and they're beginning to realize the benefits of actually putting our history and culture onto into the curriculum. Because what has happened, we have been begging for it, and what they have done, they have taken away, and they have done that for us, but now they're giving it back to our children through European eyes, because we've asked for it, but we're not doing it for ourselves. So it's gone away, it's done, and it's given back to our children, and it's delivered through a European mindset. And even where Black scholars have contributed to getting our history and culture on the curriculum, it still has to be signed off by the European education process. So there again, institutional racism is still within that, but we can do something about it. But of course, it cannot be done through schooling, but we're going to come to that. Because the academization of Africanness, which is our history, our philosophy, our education, our economics, continues to be colonized if we don't have input into it from the start unto the end. So we may find, as I've said, that things are more Caribbean, more African, more blacker, you can say, but it still is under this modern colonization, and this perpetuates the notion of superiority of the Western ways, and we continue to see ourselves through European eyes. If we are going to allow European to rewrite or to write the history as the culture and the philosophy as we want it to be. And it goes even further, brothers and sisters, where we have been given as a community full permission to develop and deliver our own curriculum, particularly within universities. There are 110 out of 18,400 Black professors that were in professors in 2016, so it's some time back now, and these are often professors that are not in Russell Group universities. They have been, these professors have been are academics who've been involved in the production of Black knowledge in their own academic corners with their own group of students, so that they're still not always having the impact on the whole university or student body. That is deliberate, and we mustn't leave it there and count that as success, because what happens here is that it objectifies Blacks as something to be studied and explained rather than a people or group of people to learn from. It's another form of institutional racism by the back door, and it's a goodwill gesture to keep us in place, because what we want is we want our culture, our history, and our philosophy to be infused and embedded within all of the curriculum, within all of the subjects that are operating within universities, not just as this particular class that is studied over here from a group of students who may wish to do so. No. That's not what we want. We want it to be across the whole board there. So just going back, and just a reminder for us all of the difference between education and schooling, because it's very often to mix them up together. Those words are used interchangeably. Education is the acquisition of knowledge, and the purpose of education is to prepare ourselves, our families, and our communities. And when this is done correctly, it will result in the discovery and meaning of self, and finding a satisfying purpose for ourselves. You see, education is what remains after one has forgotten what one has learned in school. Albert Einstein said that. So what we learn in school, the education, is then what we do with it. However, we must remember that schooling is the process of how you get that knowledge, that education. And the purpose of schooling is not about teaching, but it's about obeying orders, so our pupils can become predictable, they can become controllable in later life. The purpose is to prepare for the critical theorist social agenda, and some of the brothers and sisters on the platform have heard me talk about the series on critical theory, and maybe that's something we need to go back and to remind ourselves again. Because if our children can become machines of the schooling system, then our children will become machines of the government and social system, regardless of which political which political party is in power. Now, Marina Wright Endelman, she's an American activist for children's rights. She said, education is for improving the lives of others and for leaving your community and world better than how you find it. And if our children are not leaving school able to do this, then we have to seriously question the schooling they're being offered. Because as we look around, we can see that our young people and ourselves are not getting healthier. We're not flooding the educational institutions. We're not achieving the highest grades. We're not becoming more economically independent. Therefore, we have to think what we are going to do and not question how to change the schooling system. Because as I've said, it's working exactly as it's designed to be. So we have to look at now, what can we do for self? And David Illich, he writes about the education and how we need to dumb down children. And he refers to schooling as a form of ritual or witchcraft, with its own symbols and practices and orders. It's its own secret society, because it's secret to parents, it's secret to teachers, and it's secret to the young people themselves, because we don't understand what is going on with schooling. So it shows that it is impossible for schooling and education to be used as interchangeable words. And it is done so deliberately, because it makes it harder for us to really tell the difference and compartmentalize each other. So compartmentalize them both, so we can move on in the right direction. And just as a point here, I know there's going to be some families who home educate. I wasn't in a position where I could do that, but research shows, and this is not Black research, this is white research, that pupils educated at home are 5 to 10 years ahead of those in formal schools, even when they're following the same school curriculum. And so the only difference then we can say between school and home is how the young person is schooled. That is really the only difference, because this curriculum is the same in both. So we know that schooling has some freebies with it. So it offers school meals, extended curricular activities, therapies, and other services. And these things are good. John Taylor Gatto said, schooling, however, is a true synthetic family for children, better than the original one for many poor kids. So this is a phrase that we have to look at, because if we're now giving the free school meals, we're giving the extended curriculars, we're offering therapies. These are things that we, as busy working families now, don't have the time, or parents don't have the time to spend with our children in that way, or we're told that you're not doing it right, parents. You don't understand the psychology of it. You don't understand the philosophy of it. Let us do that for you. So let's have a look at some of the impact of schooling and how we are sentencing our children to a life of submission and servitude. So we're teaching our young people in schooling, and remember, it's not we're sitting there in the lesson doing this, it is what is picked up. It is that untaught life lesson. We're teaching in indifference to the adult world. So society doesn't want our children to grow up, don't even want the adults to grow up. And we can see that through marketing and through the media, it's aiming to keep our children and us as adults in a childlike state, because that makes it easier for us to be manipulated, coerced, and to become a dependence. Schooling tells us there's no time for curiosity, or even time for concentration, because it's not about us solving problems for ourselves, it's about having the problem solved for us, and then we use the solution. Schooling teaches that hidden lesson about having a poor sense for the future. So we don't have a sense for tomorrow or the future. It's all about living in the moment, which means we're not doing any forward planning. That means we therefore have to be leaving the plan to others, And last week and all the time I talk about that the elite plan 120 years at least in advance. That's their words, not mine. But yet we're told just to think about the moment. Another hidden message, the impact of schooling, is that there's no links to our history. It's about breaking that link with our history so that we don't see how it impacts on our present or our future. So we don't know or appreciate who we were. So therefore we don't know or appreciate who we can become. Therefore somebody else can decide who we become. We're taught to be cruel and to accept cruelty. And I'm not just talking about bullying in school. It's about, we're not taught to have compassion. We're not taught to have empathy with each other anymore. We see that in our TV viewing. We see that on how social media works with our young people and what they read and the impact that it has. And that's one of the hidden messages of schooling. Schooling also teaches a fear of intimacy. It actually promotes this kind of disgust of intimacy in any form, because what it does is about creating artificial groups and creating artificial networks and creating relationships that are ingenuous. And we're going to move on, if there's time, Brother Andrew, into the difference between community and networking, and I'll be able to explain more about this fear of intimacy and how it's encouraged through networking. We're taught through this method of schooling about the need for materialism, because we're taught that we can only value ourselves or be valued as a way directly linked to what we have, and that materialism, to what we own and who we are within society. That's where we're getting our value base from. So the more we have and the more materialism we have, the more we are worth. And it goes very much back to that advert that Brother Andrew shows every week, where the gentleman is talking about we buy from one family and then go home and believe we've accomplished something when we haven't. We're just made somebody else richer. And the hidden curriculum or schooling teaches us to lack resilience. And that's why we have high numbers of our children now with poor self-esteem, with raised levels of mental anxiety. They're timid, passive, and dependent. And what they do to cover that lack of resilience and that kind of fear of life is they cover it with bravado and with aggression. But that is all a part of the programming as well. So schooling is a very dangerous thing. And even though we can't change it, to be aware of it allows us as parents and as adults and as carers to alter how we engage with the school, how we engage with our young people, to make sure we mitigate some of the impacts here. What we know about the elite, who are educated in their very grand schools, and some of our own young people go to such schools. But what they are taught there, they're taught about self-knowledge, they're taught about self-awareness, they're taught about self-discovery, which allows them to move on to self-teach. And through self-teaching, it creates their own lifetimes of values. And this is not a focus or an intention in the state school system. And the elite know this because they say, whatever an education is, it should make you a unique individual, not a conformist. It should furnish you with an original spirit with which to tackle the big challenges. It should allow you to find values which will be your roadmap through life. It should make you spiritually rich. It should teach you what is important, how to live and how to die. And that is a message that they are young people, or that young people in elite schools are taught. So this is so what this means is that exam results don't matter for this group of people, because it's not about money or about contacts. It's about how do you know how to think? Do you know how to communicate? And do you know how to behave as a leader of yourself and a leader of others in a sociopathic way, which is an emotionless way, because that is what runs society. That's what will make you powerful. And as we look at governmental parties today, there is no difference between the parties in any way. They're not sending a separate message where you could say, I'm a Labourite, I'm a Conservative. It doesn't work that way anymore, because the elite are taught in whichever party you may come from to think in this way. And so let's have a look at as well why then schooling is not being reformed. Well, one of the key reasons is that it's a great financial investment, because it keeps unemployed people employed, and it keeps certain businesses in profit. And what I'm talking about, I'm talking to things like private tutoring, creates money, counseling and therapies is a money making, having teaching assistants or one-to-ones, because we're saying our children are not manageable within a class. That's creating employment. The youth prison system, schooling, if we're not going to reform schooling, it allows that industry to keep going. If we don't reform schooling, it allows the court systems to keep going as families break down, or businesses break down, or people can't interact. It keeps loan repayments and the banks and the tax office and those people in employment and drawing in money, because we get ourselves into debt. We've got people who publish textbooks, and textbooks change every couple of years. Exam papers cost about £40 per paper. So if you've got a child, a young person who's sitting 10 exams, that's about £400 on that child. That's a lot. That's a money-making venture for our children. There's educational analysts, there's education consultants, education advisors, education researchers and policy makers, the whole Ofsted machinery, the whole food supply chain, MIS, management information systems. All of these make money off schooling, because if our children were educated and the schooling system was right, we wouldn't need half of those things there. And so we need to see that money is made through schooling, not through education. So family, when our children come home at the end of the day, our homes must be a place where we replace the national curriculum with the cultural curriculum, so that our young people learn to look inwards until they master the philosophy of self, until they master the first idea, till they know themselves. Because I was doing some research for this, as you know, and I discovered that it takes less than 100 hours to become fully literate. Yet we give our children to a system that takes, and I've got the numbers here, so from 5 years old to 16 years old, that's roughly 4,095 hours, because that's 39 weeks times 15 years, that's 7 hours a day. That's 4,095 hours. From year 3 to sixth form, that's 4,641 hours. And still some of our children cannot read by the time they leave at 16. Yet it takes 100 hours to become fully literate if the focus is correct there. And if our children start school at 3 years and leave at 18, that's 5,187 hours. And so you can see that after going from a full education system right through from 3 years old to the end of a 4-year degrees, which is calculated roughly at 6,500 hours, we are no nearer to solving some of the health problems that's unique to us as a community. We are still unable to keep the black pound in the community for more than an hour. And we're still only in a position where we leave on average £750 as inheritance to our children when we pass over. So we need to be looking at what we can do for our cultural curriculum for our young people, because it is not designed for poor children, let alone our own children. So without a cultural curriculum, we continue to enable what is called psychological alienation. And psychological alienation is the tool to build society by alienating our children from their selves so that they can't turn inward for inner strength. We teach our children to alienate themselves from their families, because you know what it is with our children. or we say, young child, can I help you? No, you don't know, it's the teacher. The teacher knows best, or the teacher's way is the better way. And so we find that our children will turn to teachers or the education schooling to help them. The psychological alienation means that our children start to turn away from their religion or from their culture. And that is all very that's all very deliberate, because the society does not want our children to contradict the will of the political state. And William Torrey Harris is a US Commissioner to Education. He's the one who says that we don't want our young people to contradict or to move away from the way the political state wants things to be done. And we've got to think about how this is done. Of course, we hear this term all the time, the nanny state, but have we really sat to think down what the nanny state means? And if we define that phrase. So that's something we've got to be mindful of there. So there's a lot going on, and a lot that's being kept from us, but we have to turn to self. And as we go on, we'll be looking at how we are going to turn to self to address some of these things here. And I know that as we're sitting, some of you are already there thinking about how you are going to address some of these things from day to day, and will come up with your own creative ideas that suits your family and the way your family is set up. Now, what I do want to talk about, and the one that really got to me, is this whole thing about networking. Schooling is a form of social networking. And networking is the new way of life that operates within families and within friends and within the community. So, of course, the first thing we need to define is, what is networking? Well, a network is a group of interconnected people who interact with others for the purpose of exchanging information and developing personal or social contacts. Now, that's quite important to hold on to that, because as I go into networking, you will see, because some of us are looking at it and saying, well, that's what communities do, that's what we do within families, but I'm going to take this down into the Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole. So, as I said, today we live in networks. We do not live in communities, and as a result of that, we are all lonely because of it. And especially our young people who have grown up with networking and not really knowing community. We see this all the time. These young people are probably talking to each other on their phone, even though they're next door to each other. Some of us within our household, our children upstairs, would probably, rather than shout up to them or go up to them, might just text them on their phone. This is what's happening. So community, as we know, is a condition of sharing, having common attitudes, having common goals and interests. It's all about the betterment of the whole group. Within our communities, we have a mix of generation. True communities are a collection of families and friends who work together for the benefit of everyone and for the benefit of the next generation. But when the family breaks down, so does the community. And then the purpose and aim of critical theory and schooling, as we know, is about the destruction of the family. And so this artificial alternative of networking replaces the community. And as I said earlier, at the very start when I was talking to Brother Andrew, that another thing that community has that network doesn't is that the community has a spiritual connection. And Gregory Logan mentioned that also. Networking, there is no spiritual connection at all. And as I go on down the rabbit hole, you'll be able to understand why it doesn't. So networks provide mechanical solutions to human problems. And the networks is about a narrow way of allowing people to associate with each other. And by nature, they regulate and make things uniform. That's what a network does. Because within a network, you don't require the whole person. You just require a piece of the person. And each different network requires a different piece of you. And during the rest of the time, when only that piece of you is working in that in that network, the rest of you is suppressed. And that's an unnatural act. And this is very dangerous for our young people who've got used to this and the long-term impact, because it is so unnatural. Because if I'm in this group because I love music, then it's only the music part of me that comes out. The rest of me is suppressed and left behind. So then I go into a network that loves fashion. The fashion bit of me comes out and the rest of me it gets left behind. And that's how the network is, because it doesn't take the whole person for who they are. My emotions about how I'm feeling only comes out as it relates to that network group. So the impact of cutting ourselves into different pieces for different groups of people, for our young people, increases the issue of mental health, which is increasing the numbers of suicide, it increases risky behaviour, and like I said, it increases loneliness. And schooling starts that whole process by labelling. So we operate and we talk and we behave in this particular way for this group around labelling, or around our age, and around the way we network. So it's important that our children have an opportunity for good community relationships where the whole person, the whole child is looked at and not broken into these pieces. And unlike real communities, networks cannot offer or provide a wraparound of support. There is a pretense of friendship, which are really only associates. You know, I've got 200 friendships on Facebook. No, you don't. You have 200 associateships, and if some of them are on a scale of 0 and possibly 10 to 10. And this kind of artificial friendship, this associate groupship, leads to a lack of empathy. It leads to a lack of compassion amongst ourselves and amongst our young people, because what you get in a network is all that you get. There's no outward growth from that. You just get whatever that group is about, and no one in a network group cares beyond that mission or that purpose of that network. For what you can do for them, or they can do for you, and the curiosity is only limited to what's in that network. And you could say, why do our young people chase networks? Because our young people have been led to believe and be convinced that their posts, their images, their tweets, their videos are all genius, that they're all unique, that they're witty, and that they're creative. When in fact, actually, they're actually quite boring and quite predictable and often quite rambling, because it is a dumbed down mind that is putting this information out into a different network group. And they only serve really as entertainment for surveillance and for tracking and for keeping our young people where we want them to be. A quote here from Daniel Estelin. He says, an individual may to transfer his or her identity to a group or a network wherein they become subjected to the most intense forms of suggestion. So within that network group, there's suggestion taking place that our young people receive or that our young people give. That's limited to that group, provided that the individual's inner sense of real identity is destroyed. He can then be manipulated like a child. This is the objective of social networks. And so once we understand this, we cannot draw our children away from the reality of the world within which they live today, but because we know and understand it, we can provide some mitigating circumstances and opportunities for our young people to become aware of this and to be able to make changes or to be able to understand and how to work with this. That is our responsibility, because schooling might give us, or schools might talk to us about safety and about networking and this group and that group. But it's not about how do we as a whole person are safe emotionally and socially within the network. So I just want to move on now from networks onto all the different platforms that we see. And I'm going to share with you, you can see these stats, and these stats are from 2013. So they're almost 10 years old now, which makes me think, where are we today? So can I just say, as you look at these stats here, they are 1 day or 24 hours in the day of the internet. So this is just a 24-hour period back in 2013. And it is said that 1 day of the internet at that time get provided enough information to fill 168 million DVDs. That's what they said about the media stats. So if you just look at that, in 24 hours in 2013, 294 billion emails were sent. 2 million blogs were posted, 172 million visits to Facebook. And you can read down, but as you read down, just remember, this was within a 24-hour period in 2013, which is nearly 10 years ago. They said of all the blogs, the 2 million blogs was enough to fill Time magazine 770 million years. That's how much blogs there was in 2013. They say that Facebook is colonizing the web, a new colonial master. 2013, and it is and I wouldn't like to see, but I will be revisiting those figures to bring them up to date. I didn't have time to do that, but I wanted you to see. So already, even if we were to add on half of these figures again, you can see that we're in dangerous time for our young people, because this is all that they know. So big corporations and the elite, they know that the shortest and quickest way to the hearts and minds of people is through a 360-degree global communication in whatever form that is. And they are the best group of people to control people and to make people feel that that we have a free will, while in fact we're just being manipulated and dictated to. So big corporations and the elite, they're reaching into our home 24/7. It's not like when I was growing up as a child and TV, we had 3 channels and it went off at 11 o'clock with the national anthem. No, it's not that. Our young people don't have experienced that time of quiet and solitude. It doesn't exist anymore. And so this lends itself for easy brainwashing. Netflix, TV, short films, long films, programs, YouTube. Hear this quote from Lonnie Wolf from an article he wrote called Turn Off Your TV. He says that big corporate companies and the TV and the Netflix and so on causes people to suspend their critical judgment capabilities, because the combination of sounds and images places the individual in a dreamlike state, which limits cognitive power. So family, what are we going to do with a statement like this in a time when our young people know no different? How are we going to use this to protect them whilst they still have to live within that world? And because we know these mediums, they're not about truth, they're about creating their own reality. You see, a quote here: the more a person watches, the more he accepts, the more he becomes disassociated from his own thought process. They are more magical than any other consumer product because it makes things normal as reality. And that's talking about things like Netflix and YouTube videos and films and programs and so on. So they change our view of reality. And I remember some time back, I was watching a Netflix series. I binge watched it. And I don't know if I sat for a week and I binge watched it. And by about 2/3 of the way through, I started to feel like the characters. I started to act like the characters. I started wanting to be some of those characters. And it was interesting just watching myself from a distance, thinking, Adele, you're a sensible person. You're an educationist. You're quite smart, but even you can pick up that sense that you're being drawn into this reality. So we can't stop these things from happening, but it's about us going into these things knowing what is likely to happen and how it's likely to inform some of the decisions that we make. Now, the Tavistock, who we know are leaders within critical theory, they recognize that habitual watching of films and videos over time destroys the ability of critical cognitive activity. And David Esselin defines that, in other words, it makes you stupid. Tavistock know this. Critical theorists know this. The media organization knows this. All these film places here you see, they know this. And I just wanted to look up the word stupid. I wanted to know where it came from. So originally in the etymology, stupere is the Latin, which means stunned, amazed, confounded. And there's nothing wrong with stupere, to be stunned, amazed, confounded. There's some beautiful things in life and in nature that really shock us and we stop us in our tracks. Then it moved on to stupidus, the Latin, which means amazed, confounded, or struck senseless. And we can see being struck senseless is now moving away and out of reality. The movement is taking place there. And then stupide from the French, which became to mean mentally slow, lacking ordinary activity of mind, to be dull, to be inane. And by the time we get into English stupid, it's about having or showing a lack of intelligence or common sense. So what started out as quite a positive word has over the ages come down to talk about being dull, inactive in the mind, lack of intelligence or common sense. And that is how watching or continuous watching of films and YouTube and videos and TikTok and all of these things have on our mind. And I've got to keep repeating that we can't change the society and these things, but we need to be mindful of it and start planning on how we're going to support our young children as they navigate this maze. You see, men are born ignorant, they're not born stupid, but they are made stupid by education. And I'd like to say that whoever made this quote is somebody who didn't know the difference between education and schooling, because I'd say that they are made stupid by schooling. So we may think as adults and even as young people that we are in control of making our own decisions, but it is actually public opinion that makes our decision. It is said that we just react in a Pavlovian manner unawares. We are what our networks or the networks we belong to. We are that network ourselves. And that's all about the group think. We think as our network thinks. And so this leads to the ability of an external force can come in and change the mood, not just of the network, but if the network is a global network, it can change it globally. So we are in a network group. We don't necessarily know who's influencing that network group, who's influencing the decision, who's influencing the group think there. See, it is said that you dream like a tube, you speak like a tube, you smell, dress, and act like your television tube. And that goes for all our platforms. And we must be careful and mindful of this all the time. We need to teach our young people, be yourself, because everyone is taken and they may be taken up in other things, but our young people need to be themselves because the system is not about them or for them. So this here is a quote by Sigmund Freud's nephew, Edward Bernays, and he says, "We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes are formed, our ideas suggested largely by men we have never heard of, who understand the mental processes and social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind and who harness old social forces and contrive new ways to find and guide the world." And the greatest, or the three greatest inventions that they say of our time is the mobile phone, GPS, and surveillance. That's what is identified as the three most important inventions of their time. And we know that the phone has become an extension of our body. I know, family, there's some of us out there who sometimes we think we hear the phone ringing, or something, or our leg starts to buzz because we feel as it's still in our pocket. But it's through this extension, through the mobile phone, that we are being watched, listened to, profiled and catalogued.
Did you know the average person spends 4 years of his life looking down at his cell phone? Kinda ironic, ain't it? How these touch screens can make us lose touch. But it's no wonder in a world filled with iMacs, iPads, and iPhones, so many eyes, so many selfies, not enough us's and we's. See, technology has made us more selfish and separate than ever. Cause while it claims to connect us, connection has gotten no better. And let me express first, Mr. Zuckerberg, not to be rude, but you should reclassify Facebook to what it is, an anti-social network. Cause while we may have big friend lists, so many of us are friendless all alone. Cause friendships are more broken than the screens on our very phones. We sit at home on our computers measuring self-worth by numbers of followers and likes. Ignoring those who actually love us, it seems we'd rather write an angry post and talk to someone who might actually hug us. Am I bugging? You tell me, cause I asked a friend the other day, let's meet up face to face. They said, all right, what time you wanna Skype? I responded with OMG, SRS, and then a bunch of SMHs and realized, what about me? Do I not have the patience to have conversation without abbreviation? This is the generation of media overstimulation. Chats have been reduced to snaps. The news is 140 characters. Videos are 6 seconds at high speed. And you wonder why ADD is on the rise faster than 4G LTE. But get a load of this. Studies show the attention span of the average adult today is 1 second lower than that of a goldfish. So if you're one of the few people or aquatic animals that have yet to click off or close this video, congratulations. Let me finish by saying you do have a choice, yes. But this one, my friends, we cannot autocorrect. We must do it ourselves. Take control or be controlled, make a decision. Me? No longer do I want to spoil a precious moment by recording it with a phone. I'm just gonna keep them. I don't want to take a picture of all my meals anymore. I'm just gonna eat them. I don't want the new app, the new software, or the new update. And if I want to post an old photo, who says I have to wait until Thursday? I'm so tired of performing in the pageantry of vanity and conforming to this accepted form of digital insanity. Call me crazy, but I imagine a world where we smile when we have low batteries. Cause that'll mean we'll be one bar closer to humanity.
So brothers and sisters, I think Brother Andrew's about to stop me there. Brother Andrew, that's an ideal time because I'm going to move on to data mining. I just want to close by saying that, brothers and sisters, I don't want this to be a scaremongering session. We've got part 3 to come and we'll be looking at some of the solutions there. But I just want to put us in the picture of where our young people really are today and what schooling has done to our young people today and will continue to do to our young people today, so that we know we're a different generation and we cannot be getting our children to think like us. We have to be thinking like them and where they find themselves. So I will, if that's what you'd like, Brother Andrew, I'm happy to stop right there. Brothers and sisters, I hope that you can see some light at the end of the tunnel, but we are getting there, and I'm hoping next week we will get to close through part 3 and we'll be looking at how we are going to start addressing the issues around the schooling that our young people are engaged in the school place as well as in society.
Oh, wow, brothers and sisters, if you can come off share screen, sis. Oh my God, brothers and sisters, I like what Sister Polly put down. Polly put down power. If you believe tonight has been a night of power, just write down the letters power, P-O-W-E-R. Put down power for my queen here, sister, lady, my aunt Adele. Power. That's all we need to say. Polly, you said it right. Power. If tonight was a night of power, come on. She literally killed the game once again. Wow. Now, Lady Adele, boy, you've caused me some major problems on this platform, sister, because my God, we have never had anyone who 3 weeks on the trot. Not even I've done 3 weeks on the trot. And and Lady Adele, my God, you've created. I know you got a movement within yourself already, but brothers and sisters, this show is about you. This show is about you, brothers and sisters. So I'm going to ask you a question. Would you prefer we continue with Lady Adele next week on this dumbing down and part 3? Because originally we had planned a massive, big event on Black Health. But do we need to carry on with Lady Adele going deeper into this realm of information? Because I must say, Lady Adele, I love your imagery. The video you just dropped just then was fire.
Yeah,
was
very
absolute fire, sister. So, brothers, you know, Hidden Truth is about you. Hidden Truth is about you, brother. Do we stay on education with Lady Adele, or do we move on to the Black Health series? Let me know, brothers and sisters. Let me know. Wow, wow. Results are coming in. Results are coming in, Lady Adele. Jeez. Okay. Wow, wow, wow. Well, Lady Adele, I think the course has gone down for yours, beloved, because an overwhelming 94% want to carry on with you, Lady Adele, and to kill it out next week. So, brothers and sisters, you've chosen, you made that decision, not myself. You've said you want Lady Adele still to go deeper so you can unravel this whole situation. Now, Lady Adele,
yeah.
Please, before I carry on, where are you taking us next week so they know in advance?
So next week, I want to start off by looking at data mining. So, for example, just thinking, did you know that tweets are stored in the Library of Congress? Do you realize that even though tweets are 140 characters, that with that tweet goes your IP address, is there linked to your bank accounts? There's backdoor information gold mining on you. So we're going to look at data mining. We're going to be looking at what our young people, what technology is going to look at. We're going to look at nanobots and technology. I can't even think of the rest, but we're going.
Don't worry, my queen.
Avatars, biological warfare. We're going to look at post-humanism, transhumanism. We're going to look at the movement to create avatars that are with given consciousness, how far away from that, and all these other issues that our young people will either be designing, building, or will start to take over. So
wow,
we've got there to go.
All right, my queen. Jeez. Sis, I think your microphone's touching something because we can hear a lot of scraping.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. Brothers and sisters, you've heard from Lady Adele yourself now, man. My goody gumdrops. Brothers and sisters, do you think what Lady Adele is dropping today, do you believe it's the truth? Let me know. Do you believe what you heard today? We gave her an hour-and-a-half presentation time this time. Do you believe that what you heard Lady Adele drop was the truth? And do you believe it's worth telling a friend to come and join us next week? Because that's what I'm talking about. We're in the people's movement, brothers and sisters. We're in the business of letting our people know the truth. And if you believe that tonight was the truth, and you believe that tonight was a night that other people should be listening to, then I'm saying to you, brothers and sisters, please, please, please share this truth, man. Don't keep it to yourself. Share the truth, man. Let other people know. And brothers and sisters, tonight, you can get a copy of the show tonight by literally, look, brothers and sisters, I would like all of you, please, if you've not done it already, subscribe to the Hidden Truth channel, the Investigator 100. I think Sister Smira, who's not feeling too well in her back at the moment, she may share the link. But brothers, we're asking you to literally subscribe, like, and share the channel so that literally other brothers who may miss a Tuesday night can hit on this. So brothers, if you're not subscribed yet, please, please, please subscribe now and join the Hidden Truth platform. Lady Adele, man, you've done some work tonight. You have literally raised the bar tonight, sister. Wow, wow, wow. You have raised the bar tonight. This has definitely been Black Thought Nubian Tuesday, we call it. Nubian Tuesday, we call it, brothers. Sister Shirley says, mind-blowing. Oh my God. Can my brain remember all of these powerful information? That's why, Sister Shirley, you need to subscribe to the Hidden Truth channel, the Investigator 100, and make sure you review tonight's show, because Lady Adele's been putting months of study into these presentations. Okay, brothers and sisters.
We're just out in sunny Portugal. I'm wanting to say, Guan Papa G.
So you're with the Investigator, Guan Papa G, Hidden Truth channel. And brothers and sisters, remember, never, ever, ever give up, man. We will be the winners. Okay, we're going to produce that next generation. We will be the winners. Okay, and our people have not done their work in vain. Brothers and sisters, can you please drop some fives for Lady Adele tonight? If only if you feel it. If you didn't feel it, don't do it. I want the sisters to, Lady Adele, if you're still listening, watch the chat line and just see the fives that are coming in, man. We reached around about 330 laptop holders today. I can't wait to see what the total amount is, but hundreds have been listening to you, Lady Adele, and I can just see nothing but fives. I can see nothing but fives. Let the sister know that the Hidden Truth channel does not play, brothers and sisters. We support people like Lady Adele, who we can see have done their research, and they just want to teach the truth to wake us up. They are dumbing down the nation. Yeah, let's make some noise for our brother. Oh God, Gregory Logan, head teacher, to me, one of the best head teachers. And the fact that we've got a Rasta brother who's proud to show his heritage. Lady Adele says it's not enough that we have black head teachers, but it's more important that we have black head teachers who are also conscious, brothers and sisters. And you can see there the Investigator working in one of these schools in Hackney. We work in the hood, brothers and sisters. We don't run